Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. We are finally into 1 Kings.
1 kilograms.
Yes, 1 Kings. We finally stopped speaking to Sir not appearing in this book. Yeah,
we got a lot of kings appearing in this book, which is good. Or I guess in this book and the next one. But at least with I don't think necessarily this episode, but we will be getting into actual more historical stuff. Like soon enough, we're gonna have extra biblical evidence, pretty solid extra biblical evidence. So yeah, it's very exciting, archaeologically speaking.
There's gates that are named that actually exist and appear to have been done at the same time. So that's gonna be really cool. But first, David has to die. Oh, which gives me joy.
He needs to. It's been a while. And plus, we already got his last words. What's he doing not being dead yet? Come on, man.
I know. Well, you know how it is in the Bible. Everybody important has to die 6 or 7 times. I'm not really sure why, but it does seem to be a trope.
Well, I noticed that Lord of the Rings had 5 endings? And they just put them all back to back.
Oh, those are the appendices. We wanted to make sure that Gimli and Legolas ran off together to heaven.
Okay. We got a first comment. Furthausen, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Offers $50. Thank you very much. And says, got no PayPal or Venmo, so it's super chats to donate. Well, much appreciated. Thank you very much. All right. And who's reading today? We don't have Robert or Mark. I'm sorry. We don't have Mark because he says he's got to do mechanic work. Yeah. So
how dare he do real things in the physical world to probably take care of his family rather than be with us? The audacity.
Yeah, I don't know.
I could have told him, hey, you don't need a car to come here. It's online.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he should do what I do and lie and cheat every other week so that I can do the show without my family knowing. And
yeah. Come on, Mark.
That's just, it's Blasphemers Bible. You have to do some blasphemy. You're just you're being economical.
Isaac is showing commitment to the show that Mark will just not do.
I just have to remind you that I'm the most consistent person here. Ever since,
and he's we've discussed this before we started broadcasting. He said he's also the most humble.
Absolutely.
Humble in quotation marks.
Most humble. I love it. Yeah. Wasn't that a Trump quote though?
So
that was the Moses quote, but probably that too.
No. I swear he was like, people say I'm the most humble person I've ever met. I fucking remember some shit like that. Okay, anyways.
Did anyone ever tell him that words mean things or?
So the first question I must ask is, who's reading today, Lilith?
I take it I've been volunteered.
I think it's a good chapter.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, both of these 2 chapters are long and quite interesting, I think, but
they are.
Whatever.
I've heard that a few times.
This is where a woman appears to play a side plot piece in a man's power struggle. Although I do love that David was such a good father that 2 of his sons tried to overthrow him during his lifetime. And another one had to be murdered for the good of everyone. So yeah, let's start with first things.
That. Yeah, read through 27.
As have we all. As you wish. Now, when King David was old and well advanced in years, he could not keep warm even when they put the covers over him. So his servants said to him, let us look for a young virgin to attend the king and take care of him. She can lie beside him so that our Lord the king may keep warm. Then they searched throughout Israel for a beautiful girl and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. Now the girl was very beautiful and she took care of the king and waited on him, but the king had no intimate relations with her. Given the fact that he didn't have enough blood flow to keep warm, I'm guessing that he couldn't.
Well, there is an idea regarding this, but when I'll get
Yeah,
to
also
that,
like if she's a virgin, then she gives more warmth. So if he had relations with her, they'd have to find a new one. So, you know.
Oh my God, the concept of virginity is so broken. It's just, oh, men are weird. I'm a little gross about it, honestly. Now, Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never interfered with him by asking, why do you behave as you do? He was also very handsome and was born next after Absalom. So it was entirely appropriate that he would think he was going to be king. Adonijah conferred with Joab, son of Zeruiah? Sorry. Zeruiah. Awkward page break. With Abiathar the priest, and they gave him their support. But Zadok the priest, Benaniah son of Jedediah, Nathan the prophet, Shimei and Rhea, and David's special guard did not join Adonijah. Adonijah then sacrificed sheep, cattle, fattened calves at the stone of Zoheleth, near and Zohelet. Zohelet. Misplaced phlegm. Sorry.
There's Zohelet, and then there's vanilla.
I think in English you would just say like Zoheleth.
Yeah.
Zoheleth. Yeah, that's what I would say. Near Endrogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the men of Judah who were royal officials, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaniah the special guard, or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king without our Lord David knowing it? Now then, let me advise you how you can save your own life and the life of your son, Solomon. Go to King David and say to him, my lord the king, did you not swear to me, your servant, surely Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are still there talking to the king, I will come and confirm what you have said. So Bathsheba went to see the aged king in his room, where Abishag the Shunammite was attending him. Bathsheba bowed low and knelt before the king. What is it you want? The king asked. She said to him, my lord, you yourself swore to me, your servant, by the Lord your God, Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, do not know about it. He has sacrificed a great number of cattle, fattened calves, and sheep, and has invited all the king's sons, Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army, but he has not invited Solomon, your servant. My lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are upon you, to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my lord the king is laid to rest with his fathers, I and my son Solomon will be treated as criminals. While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived. And they told the king, Nathan the prophet is here. So he went before the king and bowed with his face to the ground. And Nathan said, have you, my lord the king, declared that Adonijah shall be king after you, and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed great numbers of cattle and fattened calves and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. Right now they are eating and drinking with him and saying, long live King Adonijah. But me, your servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaniah, son of Jedediah, and your servant Solomon, he did not invite. Is this something my lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, it's interesting that Adonijah is trying to, I mean, essentially with, you know, his invites, he is weirdly splitting, or, you know, not splitting the kingdom, but he is at least, you know, taking a hard stand against these other possible successors. But the thing is, yeah, he is the oldest one.
Yeah.
So he should be the next logical person in line. And
by rights.
I mean, primogeniture or whatever, where where the oldest son automatically takes after the king, is not necessarily something that's established in an unwritten constitutional law in every society. Like sometimes it was very much a, the king, the priesthood would choose, or there would be a vote or among the nobles or something. Like the idea that the oldest son or oldest child, depending on the country, I think that developed over time.
It did,
so it wasn't
but
always a thing.
Also an important part of the narrative of the entire Jewish history here, that the eldest son is supposed to be the next leader of the tribe. I mean, that's been a trope, admittedly an often inverted trope throughout the entirety of all the books up till now.
Yeah.
There is the idea that the oldest son inherits everything from the father, or most of, I guess, a double portion,
including the position of authority, which is to be head of the house, which is why it was a big deal that Abraham says, Reuben, you will not be because you fucked my wife, and that's not cool.
Yeah, there are obviously like conditions to some of this stuff, but the usual like the way that they would tend towards is this kind of genetic line of succession. And we're going to see this like throughout the book, so it's not just going to be just in this one place. But the fight between the priesthoods too is going to become more and more prominent, because you have Zadok, you have, who's the other one here? I forget his name. Abiathar. You also have other designations for different groups of the priesthood. So you have like the Aaronids and the Levites. So different designations for these, and they're going to pop up throughout, the king's narratives here and there. And there does seem to have been a real struggle for priestly power as well. So we should keep a note on that.
And something to notice is that the office of the high priest is not mentioned at all in, what do you call this part of the books? The
Deuteronomistic history.
Deuteronomistic historian.
Yeah.
There was a high priest, but because remember, the high priest was Eli, who raised Samuel. So there was an office of the high priest, but it seems to have been much longer, whereas I know later in history it tended to be terms. But there hasn't been at this period anyone mentioned, because of course a whole bunch of priests were slaughtered, and you have the one remaining from the house, and then this other guy also becomes a priest and joins. So like the priesthood still seems.
I don't know if like the name. I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure if the words like Kohen Gadol, like the high priest, is mentioned by name. Like if you go to Leviticus, it mentions him a lot and stuff, and there's laws about if you kill someone by accident, then you have to go to city of refuge until the high priest dies. But like. Yeah.
Isn't Eli the high priest? Because he's definitely seemed to fill that role. At least by the time he was older, and I don't know, he might have just been a priest when he first got Samuel, but when he's like sending out the ark and it gets captured and all that stuff, he seems to have been. We'd have to look that up, but it's definitely
I think that the term Kohen Gadol is something maybe that only came later in the history, but it's the fact that it's written in Leviticus kind of shows that Leviticus is later than these texts for sure.
Oh, of course, absolutely. No, and no argument.
That's what I'm trying to imply.
And certainly,
like we see that both Zadok and Aviatar are both called priest. They're his priest. Like the list of officials and the priest was this guy. Like, there's only one priest. Like,
there was a minor genocide that did trim the numbers, but there were definitely priests, and also it's like the king's priest. Almost.
He has his own people attending to him. So like if he needs to do some sort of sacrifice, it probably would have been them actually doing it.
Yeah, well, they would.
I guess if there's no temple, then it makes kind of sense there to be one priest in the temple, in the tabernacle, and one priest for the palace, and and then you had like
the king,
the other one.
Yeah. But you're right. This is a very destabilized period for the priesthood. It's far more decentralized. There's no temple. And obviously, they got caught up in political bullshit, and so it's
We got a
far
comment
less.
from Matt White. Says, Aaron, when do we get a published leather-bound Blasphemers Bible with all of Tomer, Lawrence, and Lilith's commentaries, occasionally annotated by Aaron, including the Bill of Rights, etc.?
All of them?
I that might be a 37 volume set.
I think Oklahoma just announced that they're going to be putting those Bibles in their schools.
Yeah, the
and
Trump Bibles.
In the tweet from the, I don't know, Oklahoman Republican education guy, whatever, he wrote Oklahoma's, like as if it was a plural rather than with an apostrophe S.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Oklahoma school.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're in
schools, but yeah.
If you're in the divided freedomless states of America, find out what books are banned in your state and those adjacent, and buy them while you still can.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with all this stuff, I usually try to be pretty understanding of of other religious traditions. I'm going to try to understand them either way, but like there's a part of me that kind of wants to revert back to that like old school like YouTube atheist mentality, like the hard line, like
we need the horsemen of the counter apocalypse again in a new form.
Yeah.
There's a time for understanding and there's a time to fight back, and when they go full fash.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
What's wrong with the atheists calling themselves cultural Christians?
Fucking ridiculous.
God can eat my ass.
Yeah. So yeah, this Oklahoma Bible in school thing is insane. And I feel like part of me also wants to become a teacher in Oklahoma, and I will have a Bible in the class and I will teach from it, but it's all going to be in the original languages and no one will understand me. So
it amazes me that anybody could pass that shit. It's such obvious grift. Everybody can see it. Why the fuck are they allowing it? Like nobody understands anything anymore.
So before I'll start my commentary, I should note the commentators. So the traditionals are all from before, but I also I have another commentator, Benjamin Ben Judah Botzeko, who continued the commentary of Isaiah Ditrani, who stopped 1 Kings 7, and I don't know why. And I actually how do you say this? Transcribed the manuscript of the commentary, and I send it to Sepharia, so they'll probably publish it in the next month. I don't know. So I expect it to be published quite soon. So the modern commentators are Mordechai Cogan in his commentary on 1 Kings from the Anchor Bible University. There is also a new edition in Hebrew from 2019, which I also have digitally. Simon DeVries, his commentary from Word Biblical Commentary. Volkmar Fritz, Continental Commentary. Marvin Sweeney, his commentary from the Old Testament Library, and I also have McKenzie's commentary on 1 Kings 16 through 2 Kings 16, which I'll use later. All of them are from the 21st century, and what was
the first modern one you just mentioned?
Mordechai Kogan.
Okay.
All of them are from the 21st century, so it's an improvement over the commentaries I've used for Samuel. And I also have, it's not really a commentary, but for the Targum on the Book of Kings, a type of research on this by Dre, translation interpretation in the Targum. So maybe if there's something interesting there, I'll use it, but I don't really know. But anyway, that's all the commentaries.
Yeah, when we get more into the Solomon section, there probably will be a lot of midrashic stories as well that are interesting.
Perhaps.
Oh yeah. The magic stuff about Solomon is definitely a trope.
Oh, Mark Agamotto wanted me to say the name of the commentator the new commentator that I've added, the new traditional commentator that I've added. It's Benjamin Ben Judah Botseko.
Botseko. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very obscure one. I couldn't really find anything about him. There is, in Hebrew, he's sometimes called Benjamin of Rome, but pretty obscure. But still, I like my obscure commentators. When we get to Chronicles, we will have more obscure commentators. I guarantee you that. Okay, so I'll start the commentary on verse 1. He could not keep warm. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, in Talmud Ba'achot 62b, said, anyone who treats clothing with contempt, ultimately he will not benefit from his garment, referring to when David cut Saul's robe in 1 Samuel 24:4. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, in Midrash Tehillim 18:30, said, quote, since David saw the angel standing at Jerusalem and his sword was in his hand, his blood turned cold out of fear, end quote. Probably based on 1 Chronicles 21:30. This view is also expressed by Ishodad of Merv. Some modern commentators, like Cogan and DeVries, wrote that David suffered from advanced arteriosclerosis. Arteriosclerosis.
Arterial sclerosis?
Arteriosclerosis, yes.
Arterial sclerosis, yes.
Where
You can't
else
blame
did you
English
have
for that. Those sound like very Latin terms.
Yeah, or Greek. Okay, on verse 2, young virgin. Traditional commentators explain that a virgin woman is warmer than a non-virgin. For example, Ishodad wrote, quote, it was prescribed by the wise men and the physicians that a young virgin was brought to him, and that was a real novelty, because heat and humidity are prevalent in the female sex, and especially in virgins, end quote. And
the entire concept of female virginity basically seems to be a lot of nonsense dreamt up by men who think their dicks are so powerful it fundamentally changes us. Ugh.
Well, we also have Kara, who explains, quote, anytime when a woman is a young virgin, her flesh is warm, for her blood flow has not come out, and the blood heats all of the body. You should not say that she alone was warm, but all who has seen her gets warm because of her beauty, since any time a woman has not yet cohabitated, she looks pretty, and he who sees her gets warm. But when she does, she turns cold and ugly, for virgin blood takes away two things. It takes the beauty, and it takes the warmth within her. Therefore it is said, and the king did not know her, in verse 4. For if he did, he wouldn't have warmed from her, as even she would turn cold from her lack of virginity blood that left her, end quote.
That is some of the dumbest shit I've ever fucking heard.
No, you know what? It's very familiar. It sounds like incel logic. She's ugly. I don't want her, so she's a whore. She's hot, so she totally must be a virgin and also should sleep with me.
It is incel logic. It's that was awful. That was awful. I already want to go back to bed. That was terrible.
Good. Well,
also, I like how your translation, Lilith, says she will lie beside him, when the Hebrew is like she will lie in his bosom.
Yeah, I mean, shechava becheko, yeah. I mean,
Struggling for warmth is absolutely normal and a trope. You don't need to make up magic virgin
for warmth
blood
of virgin blood.
No, I'm just saying. I like how your translation didn't want to say "let her lie in your bosom." They had to say "let her lie beside you."
Oh, I mean, it is my translation, so maybe I fucked up.
No. Lilith was the one who said "let her."
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lie. Oh, yeah. Though this is sorry, the duct tape Bible is an NIV. I repurposed.
I mean, bosom, and Bible, I mean, so. I think it can also mean like chest, right? I think the word.
Yeah, you can like if you cuddle. you know, if you're not an incel and have ever
Trunk.
cuddled with someone in bed, sometimes someone will lay against your heart or you'll lay against theirs, whatever.
Yeah.
These are definitely things that happen with people who are not boning.
Likewise, DeVries writes that this is based on a widespread primitive belief that a king could no longer function if lacking in sexual potency, and that sleeping next to a lusty young virgin could restore this potency.
That's so creepy.
So the right to rule is contained in the dick, and this is why men want Viagra?
I think the idea is that when you lose your virginity, you always bleed, and that blood is somehow special, like virginal blood, and that blood is what warms her.
So they think that
she loses it.
If we lose a little blood during bleeding at sex, which is never as much as we lose on a period, that we therefore permanently have less blood and are therefore less warm. And also,
I think it's like special virginal blood. I think that's the idea. What they're trying to say.
Blood magic.
It's blood that while you have that blood, you're a virgin, and when you lose that blood, you're no longer a virgin.
So I should drink the blood of virgins?
I think Elisabetta Bathory did the thing about where she bathed in it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, apparently it is magical and contains beauty properties in it, so...
Yeah.
That I just found out, my friend told me yesterday that there is a delicacy in a certain province in China that's... One of the English names is Virgin Boy Egg.
Oh no, I know what you're talking about.
And it's eggs that have been like soaked in the urine of young boys.
Yes. Yeah. It's in Dongyang.
Yes.
Our species was misnamed.
Yes. Yes, it was.
SJL posts a comment, says it's like letting the magic smoke out of electronics makes it stop working. Magic blood.
Yeah, okay. On that same verse, take care of him. In Hebrew, it's sochenet, from the root samech chaf nun. The exact meaning of this word is unclear. Rashi, Kara, and Ditrani render a warmer, based on Ecclesiastes 10:9. He who chops wood will be warmed, yesachen, by them. Gersonides and Ibn Kaspi render treasure keeper, based on Isaiah 22:16. Kimchi, however, rejects this, since there is no need for the king to have Abishag as his treasure keeper. Instead, he prefers useful, i.e., quote, she will be useful for the king from the cold that carried him, end quote. Likewise, Sweeney writes that the root samech chaf nun means to be of use or of service, as we'll see in Job 15:3, 22:2, and 34:9. The masculine form suchen appears in Isaiah 22:15 as a designation of Sheba, who is in charge over the house, i.e., the chief administrator of the royal palace.
Yeah, so maybe it could have been at some point just like the feminine version of that word and just meant like some sort of official in the household. But it seems to be just like the woman in the house that was the most close to the king and like would have attend to his most private matters. And like you did say something about, what was it, the royal jewels or something?
The treasure keeper?
Treasure keeper. Oh, okay.
Well, I'm at this point, David is a bedridden old man. He's not just, not getting it up. He's literally in his bed. And clearly, so, I hope she got some credit for that kind of care, because that would be not particularly pleasant or glamorous. But, yeah, somebody's got to take care of the king.
She will come up later in the story, and it's interesting.
She does.
I wanted to talk about it.
She did.
When it comes up.
She will, yeah. That's
yeah.
With the attempt to, but this is far more like, court intrigue vibes going on. Because Adonijah's declaring himself king before the king is dead, but he can't really rule, so he's just trying to kind of, slip in at the right moment to not cause too much fuss, but he knows he's going to have to deal with Solomon because Solomon is the favorite, obviously. So,
and I wanted to mention that there seems to be like the man of God not being the most honest in this chapter, and I wonder if what people think about that. Like, yes, Nathan is like kind of telling her what to do, and like this is a good idea, and then I'll help you. But the way he goes about it seems a bit like I don't know if he's lying or if he's just like
I feel like we've seen a narrative like this earlier, right? Where where someone's just trying to like push someone else into power, or at least like didn't it happen with Absalom?
Maybe.
It's this is very much with the two messengers and one telling half the story and the other telling the other half, or it seems to be something about how you break difficult news to kings. If you're the only one to tell the bad thing, then that could be come down hard, or the king might not believe you. After all, she is only a woman. What would she know? So,
right.
but then
so
if
she needs
people,
Nathan to back her up, right? Exactly,
and then that will also might be a form of emotional manipulation. You get him concerned, and then I come in, and he's all like, "Oh my God," and then gets all king.
Oh, I know what it's reminding you of. It's reminding you of the wise woman from Tekoa, right? Where she comes in and she's like, "Oh, my sons were fighting and one killed the other." And
yes, that's reminding me of that. Yes, you're right.
Okay, on verse 3, Abishag a Shunammite. According to Joshua 19:18, Shunem was part of Issachar's territory in the eastern Jezreel Valley, and is generally identified as modern Sulim, about 3 miles east of Afula. Sweeney notes that Shunem had ties with the house of Saul, as Saul died in battle at Mount Gilboa to defend Jezreel against the Philistines, who encamped at Shunem, according to 1 Samuel 28:4 and 31. Thus, quote, a union between David and Abishag would tie the house of David more closely to a region known for its Saulite connections, and thereby provide further support for Davidic rule in the north, end quote. Cogan notes that some have identified Abishag with the Shunammite of Song 7:1, assuming that Shunem is Shulam. He writes, however, that this is an unfounded romantic speculation, quote unquote. On verse 4, the king had no sexual relations with her. Josephus, in Antiquity 7:344, writes that due to his age, David was too feeble for sexual pleasure and intercourse. Chazal, in Talmud Sanhedrin 22a, taught that David followed the commandment of not having many women, Deuteronomy 17:17, since he already had 18. Rashi, Kinchi, and Ditrani wrote that the virgin is warmer than the non-virgin, as they explain in verse 2. And Sweeney comments, kings in the ancient world were frequently judged as fit to rule based in part upon their virility, particularly their ability to marry the daughters or other female relations of foreign kings and key supporters within their own realms, thereby maintaining a network of alliances based upon family relationships. David built up his own kingdom through such marriage alliances. In some cultures, the king's sexual vitality was displayed publicly. The Sumerian Akitu, or New Festival Year, required that the king engage in sexual relations with a priestess as part of the process by which he would be authorized to exercise kingship for another year.
You mean public ritual sex isn't just like a... Oh my God. That sounds like a terrible writing trope, not a reality.
Well...
I think it was like not until that recent, like European monarchy, like when they would get married, they would.
And they had to have the sex, or in front of like courtiers, so that they could be sure that.
Yeah, I mean, the bedrooms themselves were like public spaces. And they would have like a little gate in the room, so like this side of the bedroom is where the courtiers would stand, and like
this is the viewing gallery.
Yeah, like the queen would get up in the morning and
Like
for
an
giving
operating
birth.
theater.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is...
Okay, on verse 6, Fritz comments, the claim of a dunya is criticized in that it is described as arrogance resulting from a lack of reprimand. The self-confident behavior displayed by a dunya is thus pictured as a character deficiency. His striving for power is portrayed as the sign of a weak character. The special mention of his handsome appearance is similar to the description of David in 1 Samuel 20:18 and Absalom in 2 Samuel 14:25. According to biblical mentality, the external appearance mirrors the internal disposition of a human being. Beauty does not mean the idealization of the physical appearance, but represents the view that a beautiful person manifests the grace of Yahweh. Additionally, the claim of Adunya is stressed by the remark that he was born after Absalom. This alone can be the meaning of the sentence, because Absalom had a different mother by the name of Ma'achah, a daughter of King Talmai of Geshur in 2 Samuel 3:3.
I love that comment about how it's a character flaw for him to proactively seek the throne that he might be reasonably thinking is his birthright. It's something you see very tropey in this, where, you know, you have, especially in this era, but in all eras, those who have power are those who have proactively taken it. They have worked for it, or but they have done things. They made it happen. This idea, which is also in the mythology of David, that you should just sit and wait for the power to be given to you, so that God will give it to the right person and it will all come right, and filial piety, and the king will name the successor, blah, 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 blah. It's very much comes across as a way to keep the people in line and keep people from seeking power, because seeking power is seen as a character flaw only when someone else does it. You know, the old couplet, treason never prospers. What's the reason? Because if it prosper, none dare call it treason.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Because like I one of the main ideas behind the Deuteronomistic history is that like ultimately people should be listening to God and he should be the king, right? And of course the New Testament takes that to the next level. But we're going to see that throughout the Deuteronomistic history. We're going to see that throughout the prophets. This idea that God is the one that should be ruling. So this it would make sense then that a struggle for succession between people would be seen as kind of like vain almost. So like if you are actively vying for power without any kind of without listening to God, like that would lead to your demise.
Yeah, the divine mandate. But it very much smacks of justifying the fact that I got power by being that, and making sure that nobody else is allowed to do what I did.
I mean, it's one thing if David were to die and then the sons would like duke it out, and the oldest son has, I'm the oldest and I should get it. But here he's trying to take power before David has died yet already. So maybe that's the big sin of his.
I think he knew that Solomon would have been placed if David had his way. So, but yeah, I don't know. It smacks very much of, I'm not dead yet. I feel happy. I'm going to go for a walk. See, Aaron knows what I'm talking about.
I know.
You'll be stone dead in a moment.
Okay, on verse 8, Shimei and Rei. These people are first mentioned here. Cogan writes that Shimei is not Shimei son of Gera, as we see in 2 Samuel 16:5, nor is he Shimei son of Elah from 1 Kings 4:18. Instead of Rei, Josephus in Antiquity 7:346 and the Lucianic Recension read friends or companions, reading Re'av, and thus Shimei and his companions. DeVries notes that some scholars take this to be the original reading, but he writes that this remains an unsupported conjecture, quote-unquote. Fritz takes Shimei and Rei to be a later addition, since they have nothing to do with the course of the narrative.
Yeah, when are they mentioned? I feel like we haven't seen them. Have been mentioned before.
No, they were mentioned. No, they're mentioned here for the first time. Like there
I
was
think
Shimei son of Gera, but it's not the same, right?
No,
Yeah, like, we had a whole like.
It's a
We had a whole
difference in the
section
breakdown of loyalties. Because, like, when Absalom actually fought, you know, Joab was on David's side. So,
Well, he is only here, like.
Like, we've had a whole section where we went through this list of warriors and blah blah blah. So many names we could have used, and they just used like two we've never heard of.
Yeah. On verse 9, stone of Zochelet. In Hebrew, Even HaZochelet. The word Zochelet is a hapax, and most early translations retain the word. Targum reads, lookout rock. In Aramaic, Even Sachuta. But Sweeney prefers the stone of Saturn, based on the reference to Saturn as Sikut in Amos 5:26. Traditionals take Zochelet from the verb to move and explain that either it was too large to move, according to Rashi, Kara, and Gersonides, who wrote that it was too slippery to move, or that water was moving next to it, according to Kimchi and Abavanel, or through it, according to Ditrani. Most modern commentators, including BDB Dictionary and Halot, take Zochelet to mean serpent, based on the word Zochel, serpent or worm. Fritz notes Wolfwine's opinion that the stone of Zochelet was, quote, a monument of ancient Semitic snake worship, end quote. He writes, however, that it is more likely to be a special stone formation. Yes, Aaron, we know you have snakes. Thank you very much for your support. Or a single rock in the vicinity of the Rogel spring. DeVries takes stone of Zochelet to be a place where stones have slidden into the wadi. On verses 11 through 14, Fritz comments, in his speech to Bathsheba, Nathan first interprets the events reported in the introduction before developing his plan for the enthronement of Solomon. The banquet of Adonijah is understood by Nathan as an investiture as king. This interpretation of the narrative is never questioned and is thus assumed to be correct. The interpretation becomes a fact that in turn will be responsible for the following actions by the party of Solomon. The moving force behind all actions is Nathan, who knows how to use Bathsheba for his purposes to persuade David, eventually, to issue an order in favor of Solomon. Right from the beginning, it is made abundantly clear that no other contender for the throne will stand a chance against the confirmation of Solomon by the king. The actions of Nathan presuppose that it has been his plan for a long time to make Solomon, to whom he has since his birth had a special relationship, as the pet name Jedediah, Yahweh is my beloved, 2 Samuel 20:25 shows, the successor to David. Thus, Nathan has to be seen as the driving force behind the ascension of Solomon, but Sheva, Solomon's mother, is only a willing tool, quote unquote.
admittedly, her place in the house and her safety relies on the place of her son. And if her son had supported Adonijah and been invited with everyone else, she wouldn't really have to be afraid for her life. But yeah, if he's the one brother cut out, then...
On verse 15, the aged king. Hebrew Bible and early translations read, and the king was very old. Kara writes that since the king is very old, he could die at any moment, and so if Bathsheba would have waited longer, he might have died and would not have commanded to appoint Solomon as ruler. Kimchi writes that even though the king was in bed with Abishag, Bathsheba could have entered the chamber without permission, since she was his wife. Thus, Cogan writes that the reading makes Abishag a witness to the conversation. Sweeney writes that by reiterating that David is old, it is established that he is dependent upon others, and so he can be manipulated.
Yeah, the comment here about that Abishag the Shunammite was waiting on the king, like it's not relevant at all to the story. It's just like we mentioned her at the beginning of the chapter. We're gonna need her later on, so let's stick her in here as well, so that we don't forget about her, sort of thing. I don't know.
There is actually some potential implications here if you think of it strategically. People never see those who wait on them as people until there's some dramatic reason to do so. That's part of court intrigue, is remembering that the servants hear things too, and either using that and then being cautious of it too. So her being in the room, she's taking care of him, obviously, probably pretty much 24/7 at this point, but she's also privy to his counsels. She knows what's going on. She's going to hear this, hear his response and plan. She is a witness. Now, maybe not going to carry too much weight in a court of law or whatever, but this is going to make her strategically important for those who need knowledge for court politics.
Okay. So someone, trying to claim her later on would be them trying to get the information that she has that might be
part of it.
Undoing to Solomon, let's say.
Potentially. Okay. Or there are multiple ways to use that, but the point is that she is a witness to all of this either way. So, and that she has the same level as, say, a wife in terms of intimacy in the household, being, there for all these things.
Okay, on verse 18, and you, my lord the king. Hebrew Bible reads, Ve'ata Adoni Hamelech. The word ata with the letter ayin means now. Most early translations, the Lusanic Recension, and many Hebrew manuscripts read ata with the letter aleph, meaning you. This reading is accepted by most modern commentators, with DeVries taking the Masoretic text reading to be an error from the preceding ve'ata.
Yeah, it's definitely a mistake here, and it's only a one letter, so it makes sense. And the words are so close to each other.
Yeah. On verse 21, criminals, Hebrew chataim. The word is taken by most early translations to mean sinners from the word chet, which means sin. Cogan writes that the sin here is in the sense of a political crime, not a ritual one. Likewise, DeVries writes that the root chet, whose basic meaning is to miss the mark, Judges 20:16, has here a relational and political meaning, to be on the wrong side, which Bathsheba sees as leading to inevitably false accusations and condemnation. Targum reads, will be banished, and Josephus in Antiquity 7350 reads, he would do away with her and her son Solomon. On verse 24, have you, my lord the king, declared, etc. Hebrew Bible literally reads, my lord the king said that Adoniah will rule, etc. There is no interrogative particle, but most early translations and traditional and modern commentators take it to be a question, with Cogan noting that the absence of the interrogative particle is not unusual, as we see in Genesis 18:12 and 1 Samuel 22:7, and the question is in the intonation. DeVries, however, writes that it should be read as an ironic exaggeration. He writes, quote, the fact that Nathan feels the need to inform the king in detail shows that he does not actually believe that David ordered Adoniah's coronation, an attitude which his question of verse 27 underscores.
I think there is a grammatical usage of, if you say, ata amarta, where you don't have to use the pronoun together with the suffix. To use both in the sentence kind of makes it into a question. You did say, if you didn't say ata, it would just be you said, but it's you said. It's a doubling, and that seems to be, I think it's used in other places as well, where it does this double language. Maybe it's not always a question, but I think it is used in other places where this must be a question.
And finally, on verse 25, the commanders of the army. It is not previously told that the commanders of the army joined Adoniah. The Lusanic Recension and Josephus in Antiquity 7352 read, Joab the commander of the army. Fritz and DeVries prefer this reading, with the latter noting that Joab had been the only high military officer on Adoniah's side previously mentioned. Yeah, that's it on my part. For this part as well.
Did we lose
All
Lula?
right.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought I was muted for a second there. All right. So David is panicking. There is intrigue. What are we going to do? Now, that's... Sorry.
We're on verse 28 now, right?
We are on verse 28. Yes.
Okay.
Then King David said, "Call in Bathsheba," who had apparently stepped out while Nathan spoke. So she came into the king's presence and stood before him. The king then took an oath. "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will surely carry out today what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit in the throne in my place." Then Bathsheba bowed low with her face to the ground, kneeling before the king, and said, "May my lord King David live forever." King David said, "Call in Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaniah son of Jedidiah." And when they came before the king, he said to them, "Take your lord's servants with you, and set Solomon my son on my own mule, and take him down to Gihon. There have Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him king over Israel. Blow the trumpet and shout, 'Long live King Solomon.' Then you are to go up with him, and he is to come and sit on my throne and reign in my place. I have appointed him ruler over Israel and Judah." Benaniah, son of Jedidiah, answered the king, "Amen. May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so declare it. As the Lord was with my lord the king, so may he be with Solomon, to make his throne even greater than the throne of my lord King David." So Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaniah son of Jedidiah, the Kerethites, the Pelethites, went down and put Solomon on King David's mule and escorted him to Gihon. Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the sacred tent and anointed Solomon. Then they sounded the trumpet, and all the people shouted, "Long live King Solomon." And all the people went up after him, playing flutes and rejoicing greatly, so that the ground shook with the sound. Adonijah and all the guests who were with him heard it as they were finishing their feast. On hearing the sound of the trumpet, Joab asked, "What is the meaning of all the noise in the city?" Even as he was speaking, Jonathan, son of Abiathar the priest, arrived. Adonijah said, did I stall for a moment there?
Yeah, pause out.
Okay, sorry. Okay, Jonathan, son of Abiathar the priest, arrived. Adonijah said, "Come in. A worthy man like you must be bringing good news." "Not at all," Jonathan answered. "Our lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent him with Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaniah son of Jedidiah, Kerethites and the Perethites, and they have put him on the king's mule, and Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon. From there they have gone up cheering, and the city resounds with it. That is the noise you hear. Moreover, Solomon has taken his seat on the royal throne. Also the royal officials have come to congratulate our lord King David, saying, 'May your God make Solomon's name more famous than yours, and his throne greater than yours.' And the king bowed in worship on his bed and said, 'Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has allowed my eyes to see a successor on the throne today.' At this, all of Adonijah's guests rose in alarm and dispersed. But Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went and took hold of the horns of the altar. Then Solomon was told, 'Adonijah is afraid of King Solomon and is clinging to the horns of the altar. He says, "Let King Solomon swear to me today that he will not put his servant to death with the sword." Solomon replied, "If he shows himself to be a worthy man, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But if evil is found in him, he will die." Then King Solomon sent men, and they brought him down from the altar. And Adonijah came and bowed down to King Solomon. And Solomon said, "Go to your home." The plot thickens. This is actually very... Sorry?
I just want to say, I think the pronunciation of Jehoiada in English is Jehoiada?
Jehoiada? Jehoiada. Yes.
Jehoiada.
Possibly.
I think that's the English way of saying it.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Jehoiada. Or, now that Tomer has beaten so much Hebrew into me, I might pronounce it Jehoiada.
Yeah, maybe you should actually.
Or just Yehoiada. Yeah. Yehoiada.
And read Benayahu as well. Benaiah.
Benaniah is how my translation has it. Like I said, it's not the best translation.
Benaniah?
Benaiah?
Is it a double
Benaiah,
N
the
or
son
just
of?
one?
Benaiah.
Benaiah.
Benaiah. Yeah.
Yeah. You said Benaniah, I think.
Yehudiah. Oh, I threw an extra N.
Yeah.
Oh, more
Yeah,
coffee
these
for
names.
me. But
Yeah.
really, it's more interesting here what David does. Obviously, he's far too old to fight, and it's interesting that his general is on Adonijah's side, which means he does support Adonijah, Joab, although we're not sure how much. Like, is it, well, we should just get this going since someone needs to sit on the throne and dad is obviously bedridden. You know, how he sold it to people, we're not really told, not like with Absalom, and he has this whole setup of talking to people and getting people on his side. But David is very crafty here, because by setting Solomon up as king, he goes to the nearest, the Gihon spring is not that far from Jerusalem. Adonijah, just had to kind of go do this over at the important ceremonial place that is, in fact, a little ways away from Jerusalem. And then he basically slips in Solomon onto the throne before they can even get back. And I mean, it is appears to be a little bit of a, dibs, I sat there first. But yeah. And also I remember hearing a lot growing up that the king's mule was considered sacred. Only the king and the one designated handler was allowed to touch it, and that it was a really big deal. So to put him on the king's, yes, no groping the royal ass.
Yeah, it's a similar idea in Esther, where what's his name, Achashverosh tells Haman to put Mordecai on the king's horse. Well, I mean, it was Haman's idea first.
Yeah.
He thought he was talking about him. But I mean, it's a horse there rather than a mule, which could just, that's a change in time and place where the tradition has changed. But yeah, it seems like only the king can give permission for someone to sit on his own horse.
Yeah.
So it's like a sign that this is the royal will.
Okay.
And it seems that Joab knew something, like he knew that there would be problems for him if Solomon became king.
Got a couple more comments before Tomer jumps in. Tammy B says, do you have an amethystine python, Aaron, also known as a scrub python from Australia? No, I do not. I did have a jungle carpet python once upon a time, though. Iconicer says, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anointed Solomon king. Handel wrote a killer coronation anthem for that. He was inspired by the Champions League theme song, I think.
Yeah, that's one of the best pieces of classical music, I think. Handel's what's it called? The coronation of George of King George, maybe? Coronation of King George, something like that. I heard them playing it in Versailles when I went there this summer. Which is quite funny because it's like such a British.
There are actually 4 such
in Versailles.
Coronations.
Yeah, in the gardens they play music. Like
I know, but for the French to play English music, I mean, also a royal.
Handel wasn't actually. I don't think Handel himself was English, but he wrote it.
No, but he wrote.
I think
he basically set up the entire era of
George
English
II.
Music. He was the icon of it. The oratorio. The
Messiah's
office. But
I always thought it was George III. Okay, no, it's funny because now, we have a new king, and well, I guess he's not George, but still.
Okay. on verses 28 through 31, Sweeney comments, David's declaration signals to Adoniah and his supporters that they are in danger. Yet the formulation of David's oath to declare Solomon as his heir leaves questions in the mind of the reader. The oath follows a conditional statement concerning David's prior oath to Bathsheba, but the narrative records no such oath on David's part. This raises questions about the legitimacy of David's oath. If the condition under which it is issued is false, is the oath itself valid? When read in relation to Solomon's later executions of Adoniah, Joab, and Shimei, and his expulsion of Abiathar in the next chapter, the oath also raises questions about Solomon.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about Solomon's later behavior, but he at least appears initially to benevolently not cause any trouble with the people who sided with his brother, despite the fact that, again, we're not told, what they were told or what the context of their support of Adonijah was. Mm-hmm. Also, that it's an interesting thing to think that, Bathsheba, as you swore to me, and there's no previous record of it, although obviously there's no previous record of tons of conversations between married couples in the privacy of their own home. But it does seem like something that would be mentioned. There's always the slight possibility, however remote, that David's not quite all there mentally either, and that they're going, oh, remember that thing that totally happened that you totally said that was very important, remember? Which, again, that's a bit of a conspiracy theory vibe on it. But I think it's a possibility, however remote, that is left in the text there.
Okay, verse 33, my own mule. Cogan notes that mules were known in Egypt and Mesopotamia from the 2nd millennium BCE, and has arrived to Israel through trade and tribute, as we see in 1025 and Ezekiel 27:14. The upper class preferred the mules over donkeys, as we see in 2 Samuel 13:29 and 18:9, which were the usual riding animals, as we see in 1 Samuel 25:42 and 2 Samuel 16:2. Sweeney writes, quote, while a horse or chariot might seem to be more fitting a mount for a king, 2 Samuel 15:1, 1 Kings 1:5, and 10:26, the hilly terrain of Judah and Jerusalem in particular would call for a more sure-footed animal. On that same verse, Gihon. DeVries identifies Gihon as modern Ein ad Daraj, the spring of the Virgin, quote-unquote, an arid lake in the Kidron Valley close to the temple site. Sweeney writes that the selection of the Gihon spring is calculated to make a public impression of Solomon's legitimacy as king. Solomon's anointing at Gihon would be held in full view of the entire city. I somehow wrote would be held for some reason. Would be held in full view of the entire city, whereas Adoniah's anointing took place at a greater distance. Fritz writes that the Gihon was chosen because of the common view of the purifying character of water, although the crowning ritual did not contain an element of purification.
It was definitely done a bit quickly. Yeah. But, vox populi, vox dei, the voice of the people, speak with the voice of God, as with the voice of God. So, yeah, you just get the people to all recognize him as king before they hear anything about Adonijah, and you outplayed.
On verse 34, anoint him king over Israel. Fritz comments, anointing and proclamation are the crucial acts of the investiture. The anointing with oil was a sacred act and was therefore executed by a priest. David ordered it himself as a sign that he was still in power. In any case, the anointing is always independent of the person ordering it. The anointing of the king can be prompted by the people, 2 Samuel 2:4, 5:3, and 2 Kings 11:12 and 23:30, or by Yahweh, as seen in 1 Samuel 9:16, 10:1, 15:17, etc. The anointing is the appointment to office. With it, the new king gains power, strength, and honor, and at the same time a special relationship with Yahweh, as we see in 1 Samuel 24:7 and 11, 26:9, 11, 16, and 23, and 2 Samuel 1 verses 14 and 16. With the anointing, a divine act is performed on the king that makes him capable of his office and places him under the special protection of Yahweh. On verse 35, ruler. In Hebrew, Nagid. It is not said that Solomon will be king, in Hebrew, Melech. Cogan notes that the term Nagid is used in Samuel and Kings of persons designated by Yahweh for kingship, such as Saul in 1 Samuel 9:16 and 10:1, David in 1 Samuel 25:30 and 2 Samuel 5:2 and 6:21, Jeroboam in 1 Kings 14:7, Baasha in 16:2, and Hezekiah in 2 Kings 25. He writes that this indicates that the term is not restricted to the period of crown princeship, but can be used also of a king's rule. Later literature uses Nagid in a broader sense, such as prince, as we see in Proverbs 28:16 and Job 29:10, and supervisor, 2 Chronicles 31:13 and 35:8. Targum and Peshitta read king. On verse 39, the horn of oil from the sacred tent. Traditional commentators like Rashi and Titrani wrote that this was the anointing oil that Moses made. Fritz writes that David erected the tent as a sanctuary for the ark. Before its abandonment by Solomon, it also served as the place of sacrifice, 2 Samuel 6:17, since it contained an altar. Thus, quote, the special mention of the place of origin of the oil confirms the view that the anointing is a sacral act that represents a consecration, end quote. On verses 46 through 48, Fritz takes these verses to be a secondary addition to the messenger's report, which repeats the tribute paid by Benaiah in verse 37, and stresses once more the dynastic character of the succession. DeVries, however, writes that this is the narrator's device placed in Jonathan's mouth for providing an irrefutable corroboration. He writes, quote, it is not reasonable to doubt that Jonathan could have known what is reported in verses 47 and 48 because a tumult surrounding the king and Jonathan was of sufficiently high status to have joined it unnoticed, end quote. On verse 50, the horns of the altar, Cogan comments, Israelite altars were constructed with horn-shaped projections at each of their 4 upper corners. Compare Exodus 27:2 and 32. Their significance is nowhere stated, but it seems that, since the blood of sacrifices was daubed on the horns, for example Leviticus 4:7 and 25, the horns were considered the most significant area of the altar. Note the symbolism of strength associated with animal horns in 1 Kings 22:11.
Although I would say we do kind of have some reference to it. So I think it's I looked at this earlier, Exodus 21:14, where like if someone is like seeking sanctuary, because that's the whole point of grabbing the horns of the altar. Like you will you're gonna be safe for at least a little bit, right? But I think in Exodus 21:14. It says something along the lines of like you will pull like the killer away from the altar or something. So like in where was it? I should have opened it up earlier. I don't know why I didn't.
There seems to be a taboo against killing someone.
So in context here, whoever strikes a person mortally shall be put to death. If it was not premeditated but came about by an act of God, then I will appoint for you a place to which the killer may flee. But if someone willfully attacks and kills another by treachery, you shall take the killer away from my altar for execution. So if
it's
that,
like even if he's holding onto the altar's horns, you should kill him if it was in fact.
But the thing is, like, it's possible that that place for safety is not just like a sanctuary city, but is the altar. So if they go to the altar to seek safety, if their crime is egregious enough, then you can pull them away from it. So he's going here to seek safety.
But it's still considered, extremely sacrilegious and totally unacceptable to actually kill him at the altar, because, you know, you're not supposed to execute humans at the altar of the Lord. Unless, of course, you're doing a sacrifice of them, which is
there seems to be a big, big
no-no
of killing someone like next to the altar. You have to say, "Come out of the tent," and you know,
it's fine.
Here
We're
I am.
totally...
come outside so I can kill you.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. Oh yeah, I always grew up like being taught that the horns on the altars were like just cubes, like, you know, like it does kind of describe them that way, as like 1 cubit by 1 cubit by 1 cubit, like on each side. But I have seen
for the altar, but the horns, it seems like, well, for the altar being, you know, cubed.
No, like on each corner of the top of the altar you should place a horn, and it describes the horn as being one cubit by 1 cubit by 1 cubit, I think. Like a box this shape, like, you know. And then also the bronze one, I think it doesn't say it has horns, but I don't remember exactly if it does. But I don't
know. To me, it makes a lot more sense if they were like bull horns or, you know.
Yeah, I've seen artwork that shows it like that, like.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously
the traditional way is like this way. I mean, the Hebrew word karen can mean horn, corner, ray of light, which led to the confusion with Moses having horns and extension Jews having horns. But
and anyway, they're grabbable, so they have to drag you off, kicking and screaming.
Apparently, there's a connection as well to corn and grain and these like little hook things. Yeah.
Fair point.
On verse 51, DeVries notes that seeking refuge in a sanctuary was widely practiced in the ancient world, as so much so that the Romans had to abolish it, as we see in Tacitus Annals 3:60-63. By grasping the horns of the altar, the refugee is placed at a convenient point where he might come into direct physical contact with the sacral, and hence claim the deity's immediate attention. Sweeney comments, quote, Adoniah has hardly committed manslaughter, but the narrative makes it very clear that he has challenged the authority of his king in his attempt to claim the throne. Exodus 22:27 prohibits cursing God or the prince, quote-unquote, in Hebrew Nasi, and Adoniah's actions might be construed as an expression of disloyalty to the chosen monarch. His demands for Solomon's oath that he not be put to death expresses his presumption that he has committed a capital offense.
Yeah, so like there's this tacit admission in the narrative that he thinks that whatever he has done is just as bad as murder.
Or will be regarded as it. Let's face it, when kings have absolute power, pissing them off is as bad as anything.
Don't remind me. As we have recently become a monarchy.
I don't even.
We still have a couple months.
Yeah, no, you're not a monarchy, because a monarchy actually has some grandeur and dignity, and like a Cheeto dust, a Cheeto dust stained, bloated ass with dementia serving out McDonald's is not really. It doesn't really have the gravitas of a monarchy.
Okay.
And finally, on verses 52-53, Fritz comments, the life and death of Adoniah will depend on his future behavior. Solomon stresses that he will not tolerate any deviation from the expected loyalty. The formula of mercy, go home, does not imply any restriction of Adoniah's freedom or even his banishment from the court, but makes him dependent on Solomon's mercy, since he can now decide if Adoniah will ever again occupy a public office. The further fate of Adoniah depends entirely on his loyalty toward the king. And I have some Christians as well. So Jerome.
Is Solomon Jesus?
Yeah, I tried. I mean, I think we'll see a lot of that here. Jerome wrote that Abishag the Shunammite is not a girl who gives David the warmth of the warmth his body needs, but is rather a symbol of the wisdom of old age, which warms the heart of human beings. Yeah. Wait. Oh, and Athanasius, no, not Athanasius, Augustine wrote that Solomon is not the promised Messiah, but only foreshadows the advent of the true king. Cyril of Jerusalem, who lived in the 4th century, wrote that the anointing of Solomon is a figure of our true chrism. And Theodoret, who lived in the 5th century, wrote that all fathers want their children to become more illustrious than themselves, just like God the Father with his Son. Yeah, that's it.
If I roll my eyes any harder, I'm going to strain something.
Is that all the Christians?
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to move on to one Kings the second?
You want to read it first?
Oh, is there a comment? Yes.
There's one comment.
Yeah, Reed S. says, are you talking about reptiles while you're supposed to be paying attention to your Bible classes? Somebody's parents are going to get a strongly worded letter about this. I promise. I was studying.
Well, you're welcome to write a strongly worded letter to my mother. She'd probably get a laugh out of it.
All right. Well, I can't help but answer when people in the chat are asking me these kind of questions. I didn't try to make it mainstream. All right. So,
read through 25.
Okay. Let me get to. Wait, 1 Kings is followed by 1 Kings again? Shouldn't we on 2 Kings and then we move over to 3 Kings? No, I guess not. 1 King.
No, there is 3 King.
It's, I mean, 1 King, technically, 2 King, Red King, Blue King.
I mean,
I Kings 1, I Kings 2.
In the Septuagint, 1 Kings is 3 reigns, or reigns 3.
Yeah, kingdoms. Yeah.
Yeah. How far did you want me to read, Tomer?
25.
25. All right. When David's time to die drew near, he charged his son Solomon, saying, I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong, be courageous, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all that you do.
The same, Isaac.
What's that?
Why did you say testimonies?
I'm so glad you caught that way.
I mean, I also thought about that, but I didn't notice, Oren.
Okay.
It's like my uncle, the big Diane, when he would talk about the New Testament, he would call it the New Testicles.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Okay, so that you may prosper in all that you do, and wherever you turn. Then the Lord will establish his word, so that the word that he spake concerning... do you mind? I'm being gagged.
Aren't we all?
Then the Lord will establish his word that he spoke concerning me. If your heirs take heed to their way, to walk before me in faithfulness with all their heart, with all their soul, there shall not fail you a successor on the throne of Israel. That's worded weirdly.
Yeah.
Okay. Moreover, which I love to say that. Moreover, you know also that Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me.
Zeruiah.
Yeah. How he dealt with two commanders of the armies of Israel, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether, whom he murdered, retaliating in time of peace for a blood that had been shed in war, and putting innocent blood on the belt around my waist and on the sandals on my feet. Act, therefore, according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace. Deal loyally, however, with the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. For with such loyalty, they met me when I fled from your brother Absalom. There is also with you Shimei, son of Gera.
Shimei,
son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a terrible curse on the day when I went to Mahanaim.
Mm-hmm.
But when he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. Therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man. You will know what you ought to do to him, and you must bring his gray head down with blood to Sheol. Then David slept with his ancestors, and was buried in the city of David.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, I just love I swear by the Lord, I won't kill you. I'll just wait until I'm dying and send my son after you.
And then David slept with the fishes.
The time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Then Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She asked, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably." Then he said, "May I have a word with you?" She said, "Go on." He said, "You know that the kingdom was mine and all that. The kingdom was mine, and that all Israel expected me to reign. However, the kingdom has turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. And now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." She said to him, "Go on." He said, "Please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to the king on your behalf." So Bathsheba went to King Solomon and to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne and had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. Then she said, "I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me." And the king said to her, "Make your request, my mother, for I will not refuse you." She said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to your brother Adonijah as his wife." King Solomon answered his mother, "And why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah?" I really need to practice these names. "Ask for him the kingdom as well, for he is my elder brother, and the priest Abiathar and Joab, son of Jeruiah, are on his side." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "So may God do to me and more also, for Adonijah has devised this scheme at the risk of his life. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of my father David, and who has made me a house as he promised, today Adonijah shall be put to death." So King Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. The king said to the priest Abiathar, "This where you want to stop?"
Yeah. Okay. That's where.
Now
This is interesting.
this is interesting because that kid. I listened to Bible stories as a kid. So I kind of got the accepted explanation for this before I just read the story. But when you just read the story, it seems like a bit of fucking overkill. Like, hey, I'd like to marry that girl that took care of dad that he never touched, that just, you know, she seems really nice, and then die. But, you know, which again seems a bit of an overreaction, but there's politics to this, and it is similar, although far more subtle than to what Absalom did. The wives of the king usually pass to the new king. Now, he may not obviously sleep with all of them, especially if they're his, you know, aunts. But they would be part of his household. He would be responsible for them, and they would not be free to marry unless they were already virgins and unmarried. And she exists in kind of a gray area where she might be considered his wife. And part of the way that Absalom established that he was king was by fucking his dad's wives on a rooftop. Adonijah's a lot more subtle, I'll give him that, but potentially taking one of the old king's wives could be seen as an attempt to establish right to rule. That was the explanation I was given. I would very much like to hear what other ones the scholars have in store.
No, it seems, at least Altered, it basically says the same thing, that it would, what do you say here? Yeah, the political motive would be that by uniting with a woman who has shared the king's bed, though merely as a bed warmer, he was preparing the ground for a future claim to the throne. Yeah, that is the comment for that. So,
could it have been seen as like what you were saying earlier about, you know, she had inside knowledge, and so, you know, by marrying her, he thought maybe he could find out, you know, discover the plot that was made against him.
Potentially, that would have been an additional benefit. Yeah, she would definitely have known what was going on and exactly how lucid his dad was and what he may have said to people, which would all be valuable information. But the external political element of establishing a potential claim to the throne seems to have been primary, if the other was secondary.
Yeah. Although I could totally see there being a conflict, because if we think about it in the way of, like, if you give someone a wife, if you give someone a family, like, you are putting yourself above them because you have just given them all these things. So, like, that was another, I don't know if you want to call it philosophy, but that was another, you know, view at the time. So I could see that as well, but obviously that's not what's happening in the story. He's mad because he's trying to get like an inroad to become a ruler. But the thing is, it totally could have been written the other way, as like, oh, absolutely, I'll do that, because if I've given him a wife, then I'm greater than him.
Yeah, Solomon clearly did not take it that way. But yeah, I could have seen that as I have benevolently bestowed upon you as your ruler.
Yeah. I also find it interesting the role of Bathsheba in the story. Like, she's just like, okay, go on, tell me what you want, and then she goes to Solomon and she says like, do not refuse me, and then she kind of makes it her idea, but then Solomon straight away is like, oh, this is obviously his fault.
A plot.
Yeah.
And that's very much, I mean, honestly, it does seem very political, very ritualized speech, but also, like, if you want something, get the queen mother to ask the king for it. You're definitely going to have an in there. So, you know, if mommy says, will you do this be a good boy and do this for me? You know, you're going to have a lot more luck than if you just present a formal, and then it's more subtle. Again, Adonijah has shown a lot more subtlety than Absalom in his political machinations.
And we see in the text, like, the way Solomon, you know, respects his mother. He bows to her. He gives her a throne next to him. So we know that, you know, talking to her was a good idea. But it seems that she didn't catch on and she didn't go to the king and be like, oh, Adonijah came to me and asked me to ask you about this. What do you think this is? You know, what do you want to do about it? She actually seemed to think that it was innocent and just said it was her idea, or like, yeah.
Which, considering how many years she spent in court, would say something for his subtlety and manner of asking. So, again, political.
Yeah. Well, maybe she was thinking like Lawrence, you know, like, oh, you give him this woman, and then you'll have control over him. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. It seems that Solomon's like, who cares if you're my brother? Like, I'm just going to do what I think is, like, he comes across in this chapter as very cold and, what's the word? Not precise, but like.
It seems like he was waiting for an excuse.
Yeah, it seems a bit like emotionless, a bit. Like, he's very like, this is what I want to do. I want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, on verses 2 through 4, these verses are couched with Deuteronomistic language. Cogan writes that the DH of Kings used David's death to portray his viewpoint towards the kinship and the ideal behavior of a king in Israel. He takes verse 4 to be the work of a second late Deuteronomistic author, since the idea presented in that verse, that the continuation of David's line depends on full loyalty to God, is a sign for the Deuteronomistic thought in the days after Josiah's rule, until the temple's destruction. DeVries calls verses 2 through 4, quote, DH's most strategic opportunity for expressing his special ideology, end quote. And Fritz writes, quote, here David appears as the keeper of the Torah of Moses as no king did after him, end quote. On verses 5 through 9, Fritz comments, the basic principle behind the orders concerning the treatment of the different persons is the idea of poetic justice. The individual is in all circumstances responsible for his actions. Good behavior is rewarded, whereas bad conduct is punished. Behavior that contradicts law and morality is perceived as bad or evil. Loyalty was the constitutive element in the behavior toward the king. This unconditional loyalty had been taken over from tribal society, just like the institution of blood vengeance that demanded the murderous death for the bloodshed. Thus, the demands of David have to be placed within the context of clan ethos and cannot be seen as innovations of the recently established kingship. David's orders had the sole purpose of releasing Solomon from the responsibility for the questionable and probably controversial treatment of Joab and Shimei. The decision is ascribed to David. Its execution is only a consequence of Joab's and Shimei's former acts.
That is interesting, especially with the case of Joab, because Joab has unjustly murdered more than one contender for, during Absalom's rebellion, and the commander that David had set up, and he just stabs him and leaves his body in the way and doesn't even move it out of the road until it's, causing too much of a distraction. And of course, Abner in the initial story, and that he also murders. So there is blood on his hands that there should not be. And yet Joab was unquestioningly loyal to David his entire life. The same thing was with him from his hardest times. And so David perhaps did not feel free to execute justice on him himself, so he tells his son to do it. And Joab is at this point already, less politically strong, certainly less physically strong, and potentially vulnerable. But it is a pretty fucked up thing to be like, I'm going to die. Here are the people you need to make sure die of horrible, vengeful deaths. Yes, don't let me down, son.
Yeah. With Joab, it seems like David felt indebted to him because of the help. He
was,
the help he
absolutely
actually gave him. Right?
He was.
He killed these people, but he actually did it kind of to keep you in power. So, but
and also to keep his own power. But
exactly.
He
couldn't kill him.
They were people that David didn't need killed. They were people Joab needed killed to keep his.
He's like, power. This person helped me keep my power and stuff, but he's dangerous. You need to get rid of him. That's the thing that's happened throughout history a lot, where you have these kingmakers and you know, politicians or priests or whatever that are like involved in the royal families in different parts of the world, and you know, they help one king and then they expect it to continue doing that, but the royal family want to get out of their control, so they have to figure out how to do that.
But you have to have a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly, I found it, Rashi has a little explanation for verse 5, because it is written kind of weird, as Aaron mentioned. And he says at the first bit where he says, what he did to me, what is it? Further, you know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me. He said this is based, there's some midrash or whatever that says that in the story of Bathsheba, so David tells Joab to send Uriah to the front line, like he gives him the letter or whatever it is, and Joab like made it public, like if not for Joab made it. If not for Joab, then it would have been kept like a secret. So this was the big crime against.
Death in war.
Yeah, so yeah, the big crime against David was that Joab kind of made him, you know, showed everybody that he was involved in Uriah's death and not.
Oh, look at the pretty kitty of Snuggles.
Oh, yeah.
I love how many different animals cuddle you, Aaron.
My wife says I give the good pets.
Oh, well,
Matt
Yeah,
White
and then, like,
says, Aaron, Mark Twain said the difference between fact and fiction. Fiction has to be internally consistent. Is the Bible internally consistent?
That's really funny because
Fiction or
does
fact?
not have to be internally consistent.
Yeah.
There
Right.
is one of my favorite inconsistencies is in Toy Story. So you know how the big narrative for it is that Buzz thinks he's not a toy.
Yeah.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah. So why the hell is it when every single time someone walks into the room, he stops? If he didn't think he was a toy, why would he stop? Why would he stay still?
It's
You
instinct.
could explain that away. Yeah, toy
No.
instinct.
Toy instinct. Oh my god. No. If he didn't think he was a fucking toy, he wouldn't do that.
He should at least have noticed that he did that. But yeah, it's
yeah.
fiction is not internally consistent. Well, it depends on the skill of the author. I mean, you want to get into unraveling exactly
maybe
how
he's-
consistent something can be. Talk about Tolkien. That'll get you some good times.
Well, maybe he realized that he's a tiny spaceman in a world of giants, and his best defensive mechanism is to pretend to be a toy.
Play possum.
Yeah.
Co-parter.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I believe we still have more commentary.
Yeah, I do.
Oh yeah. So yes, let me just quickly finish this little bit with. So Rashi has like, what you did to me. That's Uriah, whatever, and then the bit about like staining the girdle of his loins, blah blah blah. That's referring to the way that Joab killed Amasa with the putting his sword on the other side and tricking him. And then he explains the bit about the sandals of his feet with blood of war, whatever, as that's referring to the way that he killed Avner, because he asked Avner a halachic question about how does a woman with no hands tie the shoe when performing halitza, the ceremony after the brother dies, where you have to marry the brother of your husband. Sorry. If a man dies and he has a brother,
a woman with no arms? Oh my god!
How does a woman with no hands tie the shoe? And apparently that's what he asked Avner when he brought him into a private place, whatever, to kill him.
Like, I have to say, I'm going to take the far simpler explanation that blood guilt is considered a serious spiritual reality, which is well established. And that because Joab was so loyal, he couldn't take him out of his position of leadership entirely or seek justice for these people that he killed, because he was, both times, the king was in a very unstable position and definitely couldn't destabilize himself further by taking out his general, however justified morally. So he essentially had tacitly condoned those acts by continuing to have Joab as his general, and was thus made blood guilty by association.
Yeah.
Okay, on verse 5, with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. DeVries notes Vladimir Kubach's opinion, I hope I pronounced it right, that Joab's deed was deliberate and symbolic, based on Anat's bloody rite, as shown that the victor would wipe some of the victim's blood on his sandals and belt, the sandals being symbolic of the power to travel about, and the belt of the life power residing in one's loins. The Lucianic recension reads, around my waist and the sandals on my feet. Cogan writes that by this reading, David is pictured as being driven to clear his name, even after his demise, of suspicion of collusion in these murders.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Which editions use my loins and my feet as opposed to his?
The Lucianic
loins
recension.
Yeah, but it seems that, like, for example, Aaron's translation used my loins and my feet.
Oh,
as well. Like, do Christian Bibles use say my instead of his? Maybe.
I can check that real quick if there is.
What does your edition say?
Well, I'm using the NRSV UE, so
yeah.
This is for verse 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like, retaliating in time of peace for blood that had been shed in war and putting innocent blood on the belt around my waist and on the sandals on my feet. So there is a note on this. It does say that they are taking from the Greek, but the Hebrew says his.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems that most Christian editions seem to use the Septuagint, which makes sense. Yeah. Cool.
Wait. Okay, never mind. Okay, on verse 7, Barzillai provided David with food and other goods, as we see in 2 Samuel 17, verses 27 through 29. According to 2 Samuel 19, verses 32 to 41, Barzillai declined to join David in court because of his old age. Sweeney writes, quote, David advises Solomon to show loyalty to the descendants of a man who helped to secure his throne and who had the potential to do so again, end quote. On verses 8 and 9...
Didn't he also send one of his sons back with him?
Maybe. I can't recall.
So at least one of the sons is in court, I guess, already.
Right. I am too old. I couldn't possibly enjoy it. Please take my son and let him be at court with you because, I want to die in the land of my fathers and I'm too old to enjoy wine and dancing.
Okay, on verses 8 and 9, according to 2 Samuel 16, 11, and 12, David spared Shimei, saying that Yahweh has told Shimei to curse him, and, quote, perhaps Yahweh will look upon my punishment and recompense me for the abuse Shimei has uttered today, end quote. Cogan notes that some see David's promise as a tactical move on his part, given that 1,000 Benjaminites accompanied Shimei. DeVries also notes that David needed to enlist the help of Saul's erstwhile supporters if he wanted to survive as a king. Fritz writes that the contrast between verse 9 and David's original behavior in 2 Samuel 16 verses 11 and 12 demonstrates that the order in verse 9 has been composed to justify Solomon's treatment of Shimei. He writes, quote, it is not royal despotism, but rather Shimei's own wrong behavior that is responsible for his treatment and forces Solomon to seek vengeance. David was bound by his oath. Solomon, on the other hand, can act free from his old obligation or responsibilities, end quote. And Sweeney comments, quote, although David's advice in these instances is motivated by a desire to enable Solomon to protect his throne, the narrative already signals that Shimei's execution would be on trumped-up charges designed to negate an oath to Yahweh.
Trumped-up charges?
Shut up. Such a portrayal undermines both David and Solomon, and indeed the House of David as a whole. When read in the context of the entire DH, with its portrayal of the fall of the House of David, David's testament to Solomon indicates that the dynasty was corrupt at its very foundation. It portrays a private side to David and Solomon that contrasts with the oft-stated portrayal of David's righteousness and fidelity to Yahweh and Solomon's reputation for great wisdom. Such a portrayal thereby aids in justifying the DH's presentation of Josiah's reign, in which the king corrects illicit practices and removes idolatrous installations from the time of Solomon, and its presentation of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple together with the downfall of the house of David.
Interesting. Very interesting. Although, I mean, you could also say that David technically said, I will not harm you. He didn't say, I and my descendants will never harm you. There are vows that are, you know, incumbent upon descendants explicitly. And so he's definitely playing with the edges there. But it does, it does make things a little dodgy.
Okay, on verse 10, the city of David. Cogan notes that the royal tombs of the Davidic dynasty were known in the Persian period, as we see in Nehemiah 3:16. Josephus, in Antiquity 7, 392-4, reports that Hyrcanus, no, it's, I know how it's pronounced in Hebrew.
Are you talking about Hyrcanus, the guy that was mentioned in the Maccabees?
Hyrcanus. Yeah, in Hebrew it's Hyrcanus. So why do they have the Y there? I don't know. Never mind.
Oh, that's actually the dumbest fucking thing. So I don't know, and I always fucking wonder why, because so many times. Yeah, it's from the Greek.
Hyrcanus. It's a Greek word.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but it's an upsilon, right? It's
yes, exactly. It is, and it happens so much. It's very, very, very common. So common that like the word for wolf, you know, like where we get like a lichen. So that's spelled with a Y, but the Greek is lukon. So like it's it makes no fucking sense to me. And it's just
upsilon looks like a Y.
No, it looks like a U. And the capital looks like a Y.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it looks like a really weird Y, right? But it's like a very tall one.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
no, it looks like a U.
That might be the reason why.
Other times, usually in the end of a name, they would use like an actual U, but it's the same letter. It's still an upsilon. So it makes no fucking sense to me. Actually, that's something I have to ask my Greek professor. Why? Why did they do that? Maybe just to make it like
Greek.
Lawrence, if I may, I'm going to suggest that you stop trying for things to make sense. Clearly, that's not going to happen anymore. We watched the election, I think, together, and I watched Mike Tyson's fight last night. No, there's no justice anymore. There's no things that make sense.
I think that the English letters U, V, W, and Y are all kind of come from upsilon in a weird way.
U and V are often substituted in Latin inscriptions. If you look at the old Royal Ontario Museum, the old part, they do that.
Is N is sometimes substituted for an upsilon too. Like in the word a V. So V is sometimes substituted as well, like in the word evangelical, because the word for gospel is euangelion, and it has an upsilon, but we pronounce it with a V.
Yeah. It's like in Hebrew, the vav is both a u sound and a va sound, depending on its position. Kind of thing. Yeah.
You're right, though, Aaron. We live in the ridiculous timeline. Nothing is going to make sense. We have to come to terms with that. Everything is going to be maximally idiotic. And if it's not, it's a fake out, and the idiocy is coming just next.
Yeah, just to comment on that, the recent appointments where we have an insurrectionist and misogynist as our defense secretary, a white nationalist in charge of immigration. Right? Do you remember the
and
DeVries
Matt
thing
fucking Gates at all?
Rapey McPedophile.
This is just the piss before the shitstorm.
An anti-vaxxer, heading the Department of Health. Do you remember when Betsy DeVos was appointed like head of Department of Education, and her sole goal was to destroy the Department of Education? That's what she publicly expressed before they specifically appointed her to that position. She said she wanted to destroy the Department of Education before they put her in charge of it.
Yep.
And Rick Perry was put in the Department of Energy because he said he wanted to destroy that.
The only thing that is the only virtue to this is that they're not pretending anymore. That they're just out and out saying it. Not that they've been pretending all that hard in recent years, but we are in those times, the times of extreme and the times of madness. And this is, we read stories. I know I did as a child of heroes, and I read tales of, the Underground Railroad and people helping people to freedom and people hiding Jews in Europe. And I always thought that, I was glad not to live in those times. But I was also, moved by the heroism of fighting back in those real ways and really putting yourself on the line to help others and to stand up for what's right. And now we are coming into those times again in a new form, but not all that new, because the playbook is the same as it has always been for such people. And now we will find out who we really would have been in those times, because that is who we will be now.
It's like I'm living in Star Wars Episode 2, only that's the final movie.
Off topic, and haven't finished the commentary.
The tale goes ever on and on.
By the way, Tomer, I have seen, I don't know that you see them all, but I have seen so many comments that you have a fan base that you may not even be aware of, because you don't see all the comments that show up on Patreon, that don't just show up in the chat here, that show up in my email and other places.
Really?
Pretty big one.
Just want to let you know, for all the ribbing that we do, sincerely appreciate you.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to have sex with you, Tomer.
Well, ironically enough. No, but I am.
They're just attracted to his profile picture.
No, but I am very thankful. Yeah, I am very thankful that people really enjoy what I do and people support me even through these troubling times. Thank you all for supporting me. I do this for fun, basically. So, yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so where was I? Okay, Josephus in Antiquity 7:392-4 reports that Hyrcanus, I'm going to say the real name, and Herod robbed off the wealth of these graves. Act 2:29 also speaks of David's grave being with us to this day, quote unquote. Despite these witnesses, these graves have never been found. There is a site called David's tomb at Mount Zion, which traditionally has been associated with David's burial place. However, the building on which it resides is medieval, built on the ruins of a Byzantine synagogue. Sweeney notes that some archaeologists have once identified David's tomb with the so-called tombs of the Judean kings, located to the north of the Siloam pool. He writes, however, that evidence of later Roman quarrying renders this hypothesis speculative. Yeah. On verse 11,
Are you talking about the building with the tower? That's like
yeah.
That's the medieval building you're talking about with the little tower, Migdal David. Sometimes I think it's called.
No.
No.
Is
the Tower of David? Is that what you're talking about? Or is that a different structure?
No, that's a different one.
I'm almost sure that's also like, no, maybe it's not medieval. It could be later than that. Ottoman.
Medievals were very happy to build things and be like, look what we found.
I think it was way later. I think maybe Crusade, but I have no idea.
I know the rules of Jerusalem are Ottoman.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Okay, on verse 11, according to 2 Samuel 5, 4, and 5, David ruled over Judah in Hebron for 7 years and 6 months, and 33 years over all of Israel in Jerusalem. DeVries takes Samuel formulation to be, quote, more precise and deserves credence over DH's formulation, though probably both have been drawn from the same analytic source, end quote. It also omits David's age at his accession, because this normally is placed in the opening formula. On verse 12, Fritz comments, the mention of the successor in the final remark could be omitted, since verse 12 serves as the conclusion of the succession narrative of 1 verses 5 through 53. Adding further narratives made it necessary to repeat the statement in 246b. Given the difficulties of the enthronement, the security of the Solomonic rule is now stressed. It is only now that the attention of the reader or hearer is drawn to the fact that the elimination of Adoniah and his party has not been the automatic consequence as suggested by the narrative so far. At the same time, the remark leads on to the following narratives, which stress the aspect of the security of the kingship of Solomon with regard to his adversaries from within. However, one cannot help but think that his behavior as a whole was quite unscrupulous.
Unscrupulous.
Yep, unscrupulous. I know. Our
Fuck
English is stupid.
Fuck English, yeah.
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 I get it.
Okay, on verse 17, give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. Kimchi writes that Abishag was permissible to Adoniah, since David did not sleep with her. However, based on Talmud Sanhedrin 22a, he writes that only a king is allowed to use the scepter of a king, i.e. Adoniah was an ordinary person, and so was not allowed to marry her. Likewise, DeVries writes that Abishag was neither wife nor concubine, and thus not a regular member of his harem, yet her former intimacy with David, together with her special beauty, gave her a special status. Cogan writes, quote, was Adoniah plotting to gain the throne deviously, as Solomon interpreted this one small request, quote unquote? Or did he move out of love for King David's former housekeeper, so Montgomery and Geman? In any case, to think that the desirable young woman could have served as a sort of consolation prize, quote unquote, for Adoniah after his having lost out to Solomon, according to Noth, attributes naivete to the actors in this high-risk game.
Well, it is a high-risk game. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just saying.
Sable Eagle offers a comment, says, meet Tomer at the bar 21:15, at the time 21:15. Drink until 22:40. Foreplay and sex 23:05 to 3:20. 1400 next. You want to go and get lunch, but I haven't finished my commentary.
Oh,
God, I love it.
I mean,
Tomer, you have the best fans.
I would
guess.
recommend, like,
I
yeah,
mean-
giving your commentary at the lunch the next day, not during.
Yeah.
I mean, I will probably have a lot to say, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. On verse 19, the king's mother. Rashi, based on Talmud Bava Batra 91b, wrote that he was referring to the mother of the kingship, i.e. to Ruth. Sweeney notes that many commentators see Bathsheba taking the role of Gvira, queen or mother queen, which was a powerful role in the royal court, and is used to describe Tahpenes, wife of the Egyptian pharaoh, 1119, Ma'acha, the mother of King Asa, in 1513, and other royal ladies, Jeremiah 13:18 and 29:2. Cogan, however, writes that the author does not take Bathsheba to be a Gvira. DeVries writes that the king's mother is a designation for, quote, mistress of the harem and acting executive in the king's absence, quote.
Yeah, this is common in other harems or harems, that the empress dowager or queen dowager, whatever, is like is more important, the most important lady in the harem.
Oh, absolutely.
Even above the queen herself. Well, first wife, first queen, whatever you want to call her.
The highest ranked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, her position is secure. She gave birth to the king. That's
that's true.
Trump
Very
that,
secure.
You know, he could reshuffle, or a wife could fall out of favor, a concubine could be set aside, but mummy is mummy, and she's staying.
Yeah, the king doesn't bow to his queen.
No,
he does to his mother. Yeah, and it might not even be his birth mother. It could just be, the most senior ranking wife or concubine from his father's household. But that might not be relevant to this harem. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, verse 22. You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Sweeney notes that many commentators, like Knox, DeVries, and Gwilym H. Jones, speculate that the relative age of the sons determines the right of succession. According to the laws of inheritance, quote, the firstborn son receives double the share of the father's estate, and the father may not refuse that right to the firstborn son of a wife that he does not love in favor of the son of a wife that he does love, end quote, according to Deuteronomy 22, 15 through 17.
It's almost like the rules were written after to forbid what already came before.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? If you've got a rule that says, the oldest son inherits the double portion, then the father shouldn't be able to change that. Be like, oh, well, you're my oldest son, but you come from my ex-wife. I don't like her anymore. This is my new wife, and this child is my oldest now. It kind of makes sense. I mean, the whole system of double portion and women get nothing is stupid, but whatever.
Okay, on that same verse, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab son of Tzeruiah. The exact meaning of the phrase is unclear. Gersonides wrote that Solomon said that, like Adoniah, who was more fit to rule because he was older, so too Abiathar was more fit to be a priest because he was older, and Joab was more fit to be the commander-in-chief, for he was already in that position. Kimchi, following Targum, wrote that Solomon believed that Abiathar and Joab had conspired against him. Most early translations read, and he has Abiathar the priest and Joab son of Tzeruiah. Likewise, Josephus in Antiquities 8-9 wrote, quote, Solomon was surprised that she did not appeal to him, to one who had powerful friends in the general Joab and the priest Abiathar, end quote. DeVries writes, quote, though the last two mentioned had no doubt been lying quiet, Abiathar is still chief priest, and Joab is still general of the army, and together they can very possibly bring Solomon's fears to reality, end quote.
Yeah, they definitely had thrown in their lot with the other son, so it's a matter of whether they're going to switch loyalties or work to get him back on the throne. Or
yeah, I'm surprised some of them didn't run away when David died. They all were like, well, let's hang around and see what happens.
But where would they go?
Around and find out.
Yeah.
I mean, Eviatar got off lightly, I guess, but he didn't really do that bad. So.
No, he was just the guy of ceremony. Someone's gonna do it.
Yeah. Okay, on 23 through 25, Fritz, that's the final comment on this part, Fritz notes that while the narrative justifies why Solomon did away with Adoniah, the narrator does not manage to justify the act completely, since the killing of Adoniah by the hands of Benaiah is an act of despotism. He writes that the narrator presents the event in such a way that Solomon uses the request of Adoniah to suspect him of still harboring some aspirations for the throne and to draw consequences from it. Adoniah's offense is too insignificant to justify the consequences. He further writes, quote, despite the fact that the narrator is prepared to let the picture of Solomon as a merciful king be tainted, he cannot persuade the reader or hearer that Solomon's actions are entirely justified. The murder of Adoniah is understandable within the framework of the struggle for the succession of David, but does not fit the picture of the wise and just king to which the narrative is committed, since 1 verses 51 through 53, and since 1 through 53, and which shapes the character of the later tradition. The blood of Adoniah sticks to the hands of Solomon. His unscrupulous behavior cannot be covered up or even justified by the narrative.
It's true. He definitely, he's looking for a reason. It's very clear this whole time that he's just looking for a reason to come for those who had sided with his brother, regardless of, any context. And, we're not given the dialogue that would necessarily justify it or not with what was going on in the background and who was being told what. So, yeah, it's some shady shit. It's almost like Solomon was actually pretty grasping and manipulative, and pretending otherwise
we can think from from a outside perspective, like if those people had not, if Solomon did not take decisive action and get rid of them as quickly as he did, there might have been another civil war or something. So
I'm getting a little confused on this. I know that in the Quran, Solomon had all kinds of magic powers. Did he have all those magic powers in the Bible?
I mean, yes. I mean, he is portrayed as like having a lot of wisdom and having like.
I don't think the talking to animals is shown in the text. Of the Bible.
Not the text.
Does he decide in which direction the wind blows?
No, something like that.
That's the additional writing.
Quran gets a lot of ideas from like Midrash and Talmud.
Yeah.
Other Jewish. The Testament of Solomon.
Yeah.
And that's the one that has all the, him taking control of all the demons with the ring, right? And he's like, "Bring me to your master," and then he takes control of the master.
One ring to rule them all.
It really is.
I think
in the Quran, Solomon has a number of genies assigned to him, so that they're like his slaves. He has a number of them. I think it's 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, that would be based on the text in the Testament of Solomon. Yeah.
Okay.
Is like genies in Islam are more or less the same as like the Jewish idea of a demon.
Jinn
is
a very interesting concept in Islam. I've been not only have we been reading the Quran, which everyone should also come watch us read the Quran every Wednesday, but I've been there it is called secular ultra Quran, so suck.
And it's the ultra Quran, so there's no other Quran that's going to come close.
Yeah, ultra Quran, yeah. So there are a lot of references to extra biblical texts. Muhammad pulled a lot out of those because those are just the stories that he heard. So the idea of jinn, right, is they could be either good or bad, but they apparently like exist in the world with us.
Yeah, they're not inherently evil, although they do seem to trend that way a little bit.
I asked some Muslims about this. So apparently if there is a jinn and the jinn is evil, then it's called a devil. But the shaitan and the devils, they're all jinn. They all fall under that category.
Okay. So there are good jinn, but all the devils are definitely jinn.
Yes. I've never had good jinn.
But
me neither. Jinn kind of sucks.
Okay, shut up, both of you. Jinn is delicious, and if you have not had good jinn, that's because you're too damn cheap to buy Hendrix.
The trial of bitter water was just
rum.
gin.
There is no good gin.
There's a reason it was called
Ar-
Mother's Beer.
Arn, you should try that next time you're in the Netherlands. You know, the people who invented it.
All right.
Okay, well, when I was in the Czech Republic, there was somebody that was bragging. You know, we invented Pilsner.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you might want to keep that to yourself.
They prefer to be called Czechia now.
Yeah.
You know, we have Milwaukee's Best, which is honestly
And it's
the
really
Milwaukee's
not,
best
is it?
offer.
It's not alcohol, Lawrence. It's tools.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yes, even Canadians don't drink American beer. It's not worth it.
Yeah, Belgian beer is great. They have all these like fruity ones as well. Which are
Yeah,
nice.
Peter,
If you don't
this
like beer.
God servant guy is making noise like he might want to have a conversation with me. I would actually enjoy that. So
I'm going to have him on my channel. I'm going to have him on my channel soon. So I'll make sure that you guys get linked together. I'll forward the email.
All right, thank you much.
Okay.
Yeah, Ralph, I see what you said about American beer, and if you're talking about the commercial shit, you're absolutely right. However, all the stuff that I've been drinking for the last several years have been craft beer from local microbreweries. That's the best in the world.
I mean,
Sorry,
I
get off topic, Tomer.
yeah. I mean, I also like Israeli craft beer, but yeah, we're off topic.
You know what really sucks? Stout.
I like stout. I like.
You don't
Guinness.
like.
And
you don't like Tomer.
look at where you're from.
Yeah.
Dragon's milk. You talk about Milwaukee's best? No, Milwaukee's best is definitely not Milwaukee's best. Dragon's milk, that's Milwaukee's best.
I forget if that was one of the things you had me drink when you were over here.
What is it, Isaac?
Because
Oh, sorry.
I don't know.
I was gonna say
Stout,
Tomer, you don't like.
I tried
Wait.
it. You had me try it, and that was just not my thing.
Okay,
I'm
well,
sure
that's
that
fair.
he had you drink enough things that you don't remember most of them.
Yeah.
No,
I was like-
that's fair. I went to the bourbon capital of the world. I tried every bourbon they have, and there was a fuck ton of it. You know, I was there for a whole weekend, and I was constantly, you know, drinking bourbon, different kinds, and I'm just not a bourbon guy. And I want to enjoy the finer things in life. I can't always do that. I tried sushi. I really did. Just can't do it. It's fair. If you've tried it and you didn't like it, there's nothing else I can say about it.
Isaac,
Yeah.
what did
You need to
you
like
say, Tomer?
fish for one thing, and raw fish. Yeah, I would say. So Tomer, you don't like Gold Star?
Who does? I mean,
Love you guys.
Yeah, and Furthausen is Irish whiskey fan. I've been to Bushmills, and I've been to Jameson's. I wish that I could get into that. I've been into a half a dozen distilleries in Scotland as well. I wish that I could do the. I know appreciate the finer things. I want to, but you can't always do that.
okay, a lot of off topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please continue. Finish the chapter.
Okay, so we were on. Let me see. What was it?
26.
26.
Yeah.
Tomer.
Yeah. 26.
Okay, 26. The king said to the priest Abiathar, "Go to Anathoth, to your estate, for you deserve death. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord, the ark of the Lord God, before my father David, and because you shared in all the hardships my father endured." So how does he deserve death? So Solomon banished Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Why doesn't God say, you know, this? He was doing what I was telling him to do. But no, I guess kings speak for God. That there's an important message there. When the news came to Joab, for Joab had supported Adonijah, though he had not supported Absalom, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and grasped the horns of the altar. When it was King Solomon, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and now is beside the altar. Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, saying, Go strike him down. So Benaiah went to the tent of the Lord and said to him, the king commands, come out. But he said, no, I will die here. Then Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, thus Joab, and thus he answered me. The king replied to him, do as he has said. Strike him down and bury him, and thus take away from me and from my father's house the guilt for the blood that Joab shed without cause. The Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked and killed with the sword 2 men more righteous and better than he. Abner, son of Ner, commanded of the army of Israel, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood come back on the head of Joab, on the head of his descendants forever. But to David, to his descendants, and to his house, and to his throne, there shall be peace from the Lord forevermore. Another example of a promise God didn't keep. Then Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck him down and killed him. And he was buried at his own house near the wilderness. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army of the place, and the king put the priest Zadok in the place of Abiathar. Then the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place whatever. For on the day that you go out and cross the Wadi Kidron, know for certain that you will die. Your blood shall be on your own head. And Shimei said to the king, the sentence is fair, and my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. But, because we all knew that this was coming, it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah of Gath. When it was told Shimei, your slaves are in Gath, Shimei arose and saddled a donkey and went to Achish in Gath to search for his slaves. Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly adjure your saying that you know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatsoever, you shall die? And you said to me, the sentence is fair? I accept. Yeah, but I went there and came back yesterday, and you said it was going to happen on that day. Sorry. Why then have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the commandment which I charged you? The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the evil that you did to my father David. So the Lord will bring back your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Another promise not kept. Then the king commanded Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon.
So again, we
Solomon
have
of many colors.
Solomon, the all-seeing eye.
No. That's Sauron.
Saruman, yeah.
Is no longer the white, but one of many colors. But he who breaks the thing to learn what it is has left the path of wisdom. Gandalf the Grey.
Do you think the jinn that were in Solomon's service had a big mark of Solomon's hand on their head?
You know, that's a good question.
Well,
That's the
you're
thing.
muted,
The
Lily.
hand of Solomon is a magic symbol, right?
Yeah, but I think it's what's the words? The Hamsa, it's not appropriated. I think is the word.
So
I
they're not
think
going
so.
to.
I'm almost sure that it's the hand of Solomon is sometimes called that, but or maybe I'm getting the other way around. Maybe it's Muslims call it the hand of somebody else, and that's an appropriation. But whatever. Whatever. Yeah.
Could be.
Mhm.
Religion is appropriation a lot of the time.
Okay, on verse 26, go back to your fields in Anatoth. The Hebrew Bible reads, Anatoth, go upon your fields. Cogan notes that Anatoth was a Levite town in Benjaminite territory, according to Joshua 21:18, on the road to Jerusalem, and was Jeremiah's birthplace in Jeremiah 1:1. It is usually identified with either Ras el Charube, south of modern Anata, or with Khirbet der Esid. He also notes that there is no contradiction here with the restriction of the Levites concerning the acquisition of territorial shares in the Promised Land, in Numbers 18:23. Instead of portions, the Levites received pasture land, in Hebrew migrash, for their flocks outside the cities. According to Jeremiah 32:7, there were still priestly families in Anatoth during the late First Temple period. On verse 27, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. This refers to 1 Samuel 2, verses 27 through 36, where the man of God, quote-unquote, told Eli that his house will not live for long. DeVries writes that while the genealogy from Eli to Achimelech, Abiathar's father, is not clearly drawn, D.H. assumes, and perhaps has independent tradition to support it, that this is true. Fritz writes that the reference to the curse is not very convincing, quote-unquote, since Abiathar is a descendant of the priests of Nob. In reality, his removal seems to have been a political decision. He writes, quote, as a follower of David, Abiathar was replaced by Zadok to make way for a new generation of officials who represent and advance the idea of merging Canaanite and ancient Israelite elements of the state. Solomon represented a new idea of kinship as an institutionalized form of power and needed new officials to put his concept into practice, end quote.
This is still all giving, I am just waiting for a reason to fucking kill you. All I need is, just the slightest justification. I mean, he makes the assumption that Joab and the priest are in with his brother in this plot to ask for this girl. And, was Joab running to the temple was seen as an admission of guilt, but it was also probably just a recognition that he was screwed either way. So, was he part of a plot, or did he just go, okay, I see the writing on the wall? And then he actually kills him in the sanctuary. He doesn't even have men drag him away from the horns. That's a problem. Solomon is turning out a lot like his dad, and they both suck.
Yeah. On verse 28, who had conspired with Adoniah, though not with Absalom? The last remark seems irrelevant. As Cogan puts it, the reader already knows about the tension between Joab and Solomon. He suggests that by mentioning Joab's stance during Absalom's rebellion, this might benefit him in the present crisis. Rashi wrote that Joab did seek to turn after Absalom, but he was fearful that a trace of David's might was still present. Kimchi notes Ibn Ezra's opinion that Joab did not follow Absalom because he knew that he was not worthy of the kingship. He thought similarly about Solomon. Gersonides wrote that Joab did not save Absalom from death as David commanded him. And interestingly enough, Septuagint, the Lysianic Recension, Peshitta, and Josephus in Antiquities 831 read Solomon instead of Absalom. DeVries writes that while it may be venturesome, quote-unquote, to adopt this reading, the verb nata, normally turn away or desert to, can also mean adhere to, and this meaning would be suitable with Solomon. He further writes, quote, some commentators have supposed that the Job episode is a secondary intrusion, and that the interpolator would naturally insert this explanatory sentence. However, we recognize here another of the throne succession narrator's familiar reminiscence, an internal exposition introducing this subsection. And certainly a reference to Absalom would be very much out of place, because if our narrator had intended to compare Absalom with Adonijah in terms of Joab's allegiance, he would have done so the first time Adonijah and Joab had been mentioned together in 1:7. In light of the fierceness of Joab's attack on Absalom, especially in 2 Samuel 18, 14, and 15, there would be no point in comparing him with Adonijah within the present context. On verse 29, Septuagint and the Lusanic Recension have the following addition, quote, "And Solomon sent to Joab, saying, What happened to you that you have fled to the altar? And Joab said, Because I was afraid before you, and I fled to the Lord. And King Solomon sent Benaiah son of Jehoiada, saying, Go and do away with him and bury him." End quote. DeVries takes this to be the original reading, with the Masoretic text resulting from homo eoteleuton. Cogan, however, writes that it is not clear what's the intention of this short conversation, since it doesn't seem to advance the narrative.
I think it gives very much, because he says, no, I will die here. It seems sort of maybe a bit about passing blame. On one hand, if he says, I will die here, then maybe it's kind of his fault. But it also means that Solomon explicitly gave permission to, again, kill him at the altar, which is really fucking sacrilegious. Like, even if a person, is denied sanctuary, they have to be dragged out of the sacred place before you execute them.
Yeah, a lot of cultures had this thing where I know classic scholars usually call it the miasma of death.
I know.
Yeah. So like, any kind of death there's going to be like an aura in the air, like there's something in the air, like something's just not right. Like, and I kind of get where that came from, right? Because like if we walk into a building where we know like something awful happened, like we just kind of feel different about it. Like there's nothing actually different, like, ontologically, like it's still a building. And yeah, like maybe it, has, some body parts that like some some atoms from the body parts that they cleaned up a while ago or something like that. But like there's nothing like
and your aura is showing.
My aura is showing, yeah.
The vibes are off, man. The vibes are just off.
Yeah, like I hear this a lot from people that went to places like Auschwitz or Dachau, right? Like they just kind of like they really feel it.
Okay, on 31 and 32, Sweeney comments, Joab's loyalty to David is never in question, even when he kills David's son, Absalom, and upbraids the king for grieving before the troops in 2 Samuel 18 and 19. Instead, David's loyalty to Joab comes into question when he plans to replace Joab with Abner in 2 Samuel 3, 6-39, when he replaces Joab with Amasa in 2 Samuel 20, and when he instructs Solomon to kill him in 1 Kings 2, verses 1-9. Solomon's order to kill Joab is the final expression of duplicity. Although Solomon cites Joab's killing of Abner and Amasa as the reason for Joab's guilt, the narrative makes it clear that his support of Adonijah is the cause in verse 28. On verse 34 and 30... Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I was just agreeing.
Okay. 34 and 35, Fritz comments, the murdered Joab is buried in a family tomb located in the Judean desert near Bethlehem, the place of Joab's origin, in 2 Samuel 2:31. Verses 31b through 33 add to the justification in 2:5 of why Joab had to be killed. The office of the head of the army, now vacant, goes to Benaiah, who has so far been the commander of the bodyguard. With the killing of Joab, another of David's followers has been removed and replaced by a new official who is completely loyal to Solomon. The note on Zadok is not quite correct, since he had already been priest next to Abiathar under David in 2 Samuel 2:25. However, he has now risen to be the sole occupant of the priestly office. On verse 36, Solomon gives no reason for Shimei's house arrest, quote-unquote. Rashi, Kara, and Kimchi wrote that this was in order that Shimei was accessible to Solomon, so that he might find him guilty of a capital sin. Ditrani wrote that Solomon suspected that Shimei might rebel against him, and warns him that if he'll leave Jerusalem, he'll be considered a rebel. Likewise, Fritz writes that the reason might have been that Shimei was not allowed to return to his Benjaminite home in Bachurim because Solomon suspected or feared opposition there.
It's giving, if you have nothing to hide, then you won't mind if I search your house.
Yeah. On 39, Sweeney comments, the right to reclaim slaves appears frequently in ancient Near Eastern treaty texts between the kings of two states. Achish of Gath was once David's suzerain in 1 Samuel 21 verses 11 through 15, 27:1 through 28:2, and 29. David has subjugated the Philistines after his removal to Jerusalem in 2 Samuel 5, 17 through 25, but it could hardly be expected that Achish or his successors would ever balk at an opportunity to bring the Davidic kingdom back under their control. End quote. Fritz writes that the whole narrative can easily be described as literary fiction, quote-unquote, since the reason for the death penalty is constructed from simple motives. I see the cat. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think you might want to say something. hey, you got any comments? No? Okay.
Aww, she loves you.
Yeah, he does, and he annoys the hell out of me.
Okay, the escape of two slaves is a common event, and Achish is known as the feudal lord of David. Cogan, however, writes that it is more likely that Achish here was the grandson of Achish from David's story. On verse 40, Sweeney notes that it is unlikely that Shimei would return to Jerusalem if he was guilty of conspiring with Achish to overthrow Solomon, or that he had forgotten his oath to Solomon. Rather, Shimei's actions suggest that he was unaware of any wrongdoing, since he has not violated his oath to the king. Solomon specifies that he cannot go out and cross the Wadi Kidron. Bachurim, where Shimei lived, was located on the northeastern slope of the Mount of Olives, with the Wadi Kidron located on the eastern border of Jerusalem. Shimei's journey from Jerusalem to Gath requires no need to cross the Wadi Kidron. He further writes, quote, Solomon's reiteration of the stipulation that Shimei go nowhere in verse 42 suggests some misunderstanding on Shimei's part. It might also be interpreted as outright trickery by Solomon, insofar as he employed his wisdom to set a verbal trap for a man who intended to commit no wrong. The careful recording of the words of Shimei's oath, especially his statements that he accepted Solomon's statement, point to a writer who wants to be sure that the execution of Shimei was justified by his own acceptance of Solomon's terms. And finally, on verse 46, the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. DeVries comments, our clause is an epitomizing conclusion to the entire throne succession narrative, all of which has been recounted in order to record how it came about that a younger son of David came to the throne in place of his elders. Such a summary is obviously needed here, yet its appropriateness does not entirely guarantee its originality, for the Vaticanus and the Lucanic Recension do not have it in their text. To some extent, this problem is made less serious by the fact that the Septuagint likewise omits 3:1, substituting the diverse array of variants contained in verse 46.
That happens a lot in biblical texts where something seems pretty appropriate, but it's definitely not original. Like, my favorite example of this is the pericope adulterae. So that's the story of the woman taken in adultery in John. It's appropriate to the text, but it's definitely not original.
And
I still maintain Solomon is being shady as fuck.
And okay, the Christians
How can
now.
he be shady? He's Solomon the White.
There's one there's a comment by Rashi on that last line. The kingdom was secured in Solomon's hands. He says this means that he wasn't punished for these actions. So he's saying like, oh, these three assassinations or executions, you could read them as being bad, but this verse at the end is saying like, God was kind of happy with him and kept his kingdom secure.
Classic religious reasoning. Yeah. If I get away with it and nothing bad happens to me, that means I did the right thing and God is blessing me.
When you look at me like that, I was just kidding.
Okay, now the Christians. Ambrose writes that David, like Abel, foreshadows the figure of the Christian who embraces and cleaves to the doctrine of Christ. And Ishodad wrote that Joab's behavior may be compared with that of the demons exorcised by Jesus, because he tried to cause Solomon's death. So too the demons, who entered into the pigs and made them fall into the sea, tried to cause the rage of the owner of the herd so that he might kill our Lord.
Wait. The demons drove them into the sea?
Yes.
Oh, maybe I'm misremembering the story. I thought the story was that Jesus made them go into the sea.
Well, no, Jesus drives out the demons. The demons say, please don't send us to hell, send us into the pigs. The demons go into the pigs with Jesus' permission. The pigs are then driven into the sea, and this makes the people pissed at Jesus. But they just
all of this is because people didn't understand what microbes were.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know about viruses or bacterial infections. They thought it was demonic possession.
Yeah, that explains why demonic possession was a thing, not explanation that the story actually happened.
Yeah, well, you know how it is. I mean, also, I do love the, fondle a naked young woman as a pervy old man to foreshadow Jesus.
Okay. Who else? Oh, Ephraim wrote that Ephraim sees a parallel between the punishment and killing of Adoniah, Joab, and Shimei, and the ruin that befell Jerusalem for not recognizing the power of Christ. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, good Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
I hurt my eyeballs again. Sorry. If they wouldn't say such stupid shit, I wouldn't have to roll my eyes so hard.
All right, so what are we doing now? Are we done with Tomer's commentary?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Are we moving on to Three Kings?
Lawrence doesn't want to.
I don't think so.
Right.
It's another long paragraph.
Surprised.
It's 28 verses, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not as long as 2, but yeah.
It is the start of the Solomon the Magic Boy, plot line. I don't think he gets his magic powers until he asks God for to wisdoms, because he is to best boy. So that seems to be, this is where we're going to get into some of the cool, I'm looking forward to some of the cool additional Midrash stuff for his weird ass magic powers that are totally legit for realsies, guys.
For realsies. Okay, well, like Lawrence, I have other things. I've got to do another show in a couple of hours, and I've got other things I'm going to try to squeeze in to the interim. So I get it. So we're going to be doing 1 Kings 3 a week from today.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and join the Discord.
Yes.
Damn right, join the Discord and subscribe
to Milwaukee Atheists, and follow on Wednesday nights the ultimate Quran
Ultra. I'll get it right, Aaron. Ultra Quran.
Unlimited
like
Quran.
Ultron, but less evil, more evil. I don't know, more evil.
All right. Good night, all.